Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. It is Friday, May 5th. It's 10 a.m. here on the East Coast of the United States. I am a sales coach and trainer. I work with both individuals and organizations internationally to help them achieve measurable and sustainable sales increases. And I founded the Sales Pro Network as a place where we can elevate the profession of sales, where salespeople and sales leaders can come and learn, network, and at the end of the day, earn more money. As you know, every Friday at 10 a.m., I either do a live training or bring you a live guest who can add value to the profession of sales. And once again, I'm going to tap dance for a minute or two because our guest has not arrived yet. The thing that I do want you to consider is that it's May 5th, which means we're in the second third of the year. We usually mark business in quarters, but we are in the second third of the year. And that means that you need to be at least a third of the way into your quota for the year. If you're not, this is a great time to speak to your manager, read a book, go to a seminar, go online. There's plenty of videos on YouTube with guys like me giving free advice to everyone. So it's time to take action, because what you don't want to do is get to the end of the year, say the last 2 or 3 months. And by the way, that's when I get a lot of calls from people who are panicked saying, hey, Jeff, I need some help. You know, we've got another month or 2 months or 3 months to the end of the year, and I'm just not going to make it. Well, you should have called me much earlier, because at that point, it's too late. However, there is still time. If you're not doing as well as you should, if you're not doing as well as you could, there's still time for you to get it together and pull out this year and make it strong. But there are a couple of things that you need to do. First of all, do some studying. And second of all, create a plan. Sit down and figure out exactly how much money do I need to make, need to sell or to make between now and the end of the year in order to achieve my quota, and then work backwards. How many prospects do you need to see? Well, actually, how many sales do you need to close at what dollar volume? And how many prospects do you need to see in order to close that much dollar volume? You got to start from there. And then once you've got that, it's how many people do you need to reach out to, in what way, based on the prospecting efforts you make and the results you get from them. And that way you can still pull out this year. There's plenty of time, but you don't want to dawdle. So with that, as I said, I always bring do a live training or bring you a guest who can add value to the profession of sales. And once again, today is no exception. Before I introduce our guest, please, if you're watching us live on Facebook, please say hello. Actually, if you're watching us live anywhere, please say hello. But if you're on Facebook and have not connected your account to StreamYard, it's just going to say hi, Facebook user, so we won't know who you are. Please put your name in there. If you're watching us on the replay, please put replay in the comments. And if you have any questions for our guest today during this show, please do ask them, and I'll be sure to pass them on. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Doug Brown. Doug C. Brown is the CEO of CEO Sales Strategies, which is he's a sales revenue and profit growth expert, and he's the author of Win-Win Selling. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Doug Brown. Good morning, Doug.
Hey, good morning, Jeff. Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure, my friend. Before we get started, could you perhaps give everybody maybe the 2 or 3 minute version of your background, what brought you up to this point?
I started working at the age 3. Worked for my dad. And I swept floors, and he had an electric machinery repair company, and I worked for him for most of my youth, and had side businesses growing up, and did that till about 19. Went into the military, came out of the military, decided, geez, I should probably get an education. Went in that direction, got 2 college degrees, couldn't find a job, ended up, somebody offered me a job in selling telecommunication services. And I went and did that and realized I was tripling my income from that which I was going to make in the hospital, within my first year. And I was like, okay, this seems like something to do. So that's what I did going forward. That led me on to, different sales awards, building different things within corporations. And I started getting asks from people, how are you doing this? And so I started helping companies do that. And I started coaching and consulting on the side. Frankly, that led me to a guy named Jay Conrad Levinson, who wrote a book series called Guerrilla Marketing. I helped Jay, and I helped his grandson, Mitch, or his nephew, Mitch. They introduced me to a man named Chet Holmes. And Chet wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. I became a coach for Chet, worked my way up the ranks pretty quickly. I was his #1 guy, and I became his president of training and sales. And then Tony Robbins decided he wanted to buy in, so I became Tony Robbins' president of training and sales. that just opened up the floodgate. And so I've worked with thousands and thousands of companies and entrepreneurs ever since.
Wow. Wow. That's a very impressive background. And I think everybody has heard of Tony Robbins, but not so many people have heard of Chet. And he was brilliant. May he rest in peace. And that
Yeah.
book, The Ultimate Sales Machine, was a game changer as far as I'm concerned. For both salespeople and sales managers, really an outstanding read filled with really easy to implement tips, really common sense stuff that most people just don't do. I was fortunate enough. I mean, you worked with him, so you're way more fortunate than me. I did have a telephone conversation with him once, and I actually used his coaching services at one point. I was looking to transform my business and worked with one of his coaches who was probably the second best coach I've ever worked with in my entire life. But yeah, brilliant guy. You said you served in the military. Thank you for your service. Did the military teach you anything about sales?
Yes. Yeah, the military taught me a lot about sales, that things get hard and you got to press on, you know, and not everything's going to go to plan. There's been many a times, we were expected to be picked up in the field somewhere and there was no helicopter. So you got to find your way out, right? So it taught me a lot about sales, because sometimes even, when you're selling, it's like, how many people have ever, gone to what I call a secret meeting, right? You plan for it, you get right there. I remember I drove an hour and 3/4 one time to go to this meeting. I showed up and no one else did, the secret meeting, so to speak, right? And so, how do you pivot in the moment and cover yourself and cover everybody else, right? I mean, that's what the military was really helpful in instructing me to do. And it served me very well in selling, because, when you get downtime like that, you got to fill it. Otherwise, what happens is you have a lost revenue.
Got it. And I also know you're fiercely competitive. How does being competitive help you in sales?
Well, look, selling is a competitive sport like everything else, right? So um, we have to be most competitive with ourselves. That's what I found growing. I'm a little older now than I used to be when I was in my 20s and 30s. So back then it was like proving myself and being competitive to everyone in the company, and that's did serve me in a lot of ways. What I've learned over time is you got to be competitive with yourself. So if you want to be a top 1% earner, for example, that's your competition with yourself. If you want to be a top 5% earner, or 10% earner, or whatever, that's our competition with ourselves. As long as we're happy where we are, we're always competing with that bar. And as Tony always said, you're either growing or you're dying. So you're always going to be raising that bar a little bit. Otherwise, as human beings, we'll feel it's not not really going well today.
Yeah, I know you're a sports guy. I never was, but in sales, I was always, I got to be the best. I just got to be I don't care who's number one. I got to beat that guy or gal. I got to get on that leaderboard, and I got to watch myself moving up. And it's just that inner drive to want to be the best you can possibly be. And there is, let's face it, there's a great feeling when you're beating out everybody else.
There's an awesome feeling. I love that feeling. Some people can call that arrogance, and some people can call that confidence, right? So it just depends on where our brain goes. But I agree with you. It's a euphoric high that But just remember, those of you who hit it this month or this week or whatever, that high is gone tomorrow morning, and get back to work.
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the challenges that what I often tell salespeople is you could have a great year, but if you have your best year ever, the company never says, "Wow, you worked so hard this year. Take it easy next year." There's always more that you have to do, and you constantly have to be growing or you're dying, like you just said.
Mm-hmm.
We all know what an entrepreneur is, but you call yourself an intrapreneur. Well, what's an intrapreneur?
Yeah, a lot of my life I was an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is somebody who works within an entrepreneurial system, but runs their own business within that system. So let's say, for lack of terms, if you take State Farm, if I can mention a company name, State Farm, right? They're an agency, but they're working within an umbrella. Really, they're an entrepreneur, even if they own the agency, because the umbrella is really State Farm Insurance, which people usually understand that one. But that can work in any company whatsoever. You can become an entrepreneur at any company. I've come into companies and I've built sales teams, and the company didn't own the sales team. I did. But we represented ourselves as that particular company. And so, you can build an entrepreneurial business as an entrepreneur within a company or entrepreneurial environment that happens all the time.
What a great word. I never heard that term for it before, but I agree with you completely. One of the things I like best about being in sales is that even when you do work for a company, I've been in sales 48 years and I spent 14 of those years as a sales manager. The last 20, I've owned my own business, and I had another business for 4. So about half my sales career was working for other people. But I always felt, even though I'm getting paid by a company, I'm in business for myself. It's my job. It's not their job to do anything for me other than give me the platform and maybe the product or service to sell. I got to get out there and do it. That's one of the things I really like best, that you can almost be your own boss while you're working for another company.
Yeah, and that's a sign of a top producer and 1% earner, right? Somebody who takes responsibility, like you are saying, you know what, hey, I've got an opportunity here. They're giving me a framework to work in. The rest is mine. And so you're taking on that entrepreneurial role as the entrepreneur and going out and doing it, versus other sales teams, if people are going, well, why aren't I hitting quota every single month or exceeding quota? It's usually your own brain that's causing it, Jeff. That's what I've found. And, we have to look at, why aren't we contacting more prospects? Things like that. Because the thing is it's real easy to judge in sales. At the end of the month, numbers go into a bank account or they don't. So if you're not happy with that, if one's not happy with that, then we have to start looking and saying, okay, what's the cause of the problem? Not what is the problem. And, once we figure out what the cause is, and it's usually, it boils down to one or two things always, Jeff. It's either the individual or the company, one or the other. It's very rarely the industry or what's going on in the market. Real estate agents do amazingly well in up markets. They don't do really well in down markets. Why? Because they're not really doing what they're supposed to in the down market. It's not like homes aren't selling. It's just that they're not selling the homes, so to speak.
Yeah. And I also find quite often that salespeople like to play the blame game. It's not my
Right.
fault. It's marketing's fault. They're giving us crappy leads. It's IT's fault. Our CRM sucks. My feeling has always been, it doesn't matter what else is going on in the company. At the end of the day, if I don't do what I need to do, and by the way, of course, there are companies where their marketing sucks. There are companies where the CRM is awful and everything's a mess, but it's my job to get it done, because at the end of the day, the bank doesn't care about what the excuse. I can't go to Citibank and say, hey, please don't take my house. We got bad leads this month. They don't care. I always say sales is a game of making things happen. You got to make it happen in sales, and you got to do it every day, because there's no break. There just simply isn't. And the other thing, and this is kind of in line with what you mentioned, salespeople often have just a lot of head trash, a lot of stuff in their mind that they think is true just because they've heard it before, or maybe they've thought it up, but it's just not. I'm guessing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that like me, right about now, you're getting calls from people saying, Jeff, what am I going to do? Summer's coming, and everybody knows you can't sell during the summer. Look, crock of crap. And of course, the excuse they all give. Why can't you sell during the summer? Everybody's on vacation. No, they're not. No, they're not all on vacation. They're not all on vacation at the same time. And they're certainly not all on vacation for the entire summer. Get it out of your brain and go make stuff happen, because at the end of the day, it really is up to you.
I fully agree. 100%.
Yeah. I'd love to get your opinion on this. There's a lot of talk going on right now, and there has been at least for the last couple of months, about AI and how AI is going to change everything in the world. But you believe, as I do, that knowing how to connect human to human is really the future of revenue and sales growth. Can you speak to that just a little bit, please?
Yeah, I mean, I hope we never get to a place where there's a little AI chip implanted in our brain and we go, meet somebody at a coffee shop and it tells us the perfect thing to say. I mean, I hope we never get there, and I don't expect we ever will. But, look, AI, I mean, you can look back through time and there will be something that will change the normal, right? And so people always get excited or fear, or, it just takes time. I mean, if we look at an automated teller machine, the thing that people go and just put their debit card in, for about 13 years, those things were around and no one would use them because they were afraid that they would eat all their money. Right. So it took a long adaptation phase. Then there are things that are quick adaptation phases. AI is now becoming a quick adaptation phase. Right. So, but AI can only do what we program it to do, but it can never replace human to human communication in full, because it can't, no matter what people think at this moment, it doesn't think like a human being. If you look at like digital marketing companies, for example, Jeff, one of the reasons it's so hard to do digital marketing is because they're trying to replicate what humans are thinking. And it's very difficult. And I could make jokes, and say, oh, well, men don't know women and women don't know men. You could just go to that one right there, right? And say, what is she thinking? I have no idea. What's he thinking? I have no idea, right? It's one of those things that AI is a great tool, but it's not going to replace, human to human connection and conversation. It's just, it can't. It's, one of those things, at least now. I mean, 25 years from now, I don't know, but at least now. And when we look back at even things that have changed sales forever, like the internet, I remember when dial-up came up and I was like, this is so cool, man. I can find so much information. It takes me 8 minutes to download it, but I can still get this information. And I went to people and I said, hey, this is going to change how we sell. And they told me, you're crazy, brother. It's never going to change how you sell. How's it going to do that? Well, think about it. People now have information. We can, they can find things that we know. And so it's going to change. And sure as heck it did, but that was like 1987 or 6 or whatever, right? So, I mean, it's taken that long for it to get here. And I think AI is one of those things that's the same thing, Jeff. And I don't ever believe, and this is my personal belief. And, I also have a technology company and, I hear a lot of chatter on this. AI is going to move the needle, but I don't think it's going to replace, and, it might replace certain job functions, just like all automation is going to in time. I mean, it's just what happens. You go to Amazon.com right now and want to return something, you go to Whole Foods, you got to stand at a kiosk now and you can return your stuff. You don't talk to people. I think that's really how it's going to play out.
Yeah. I'm old enough, as you are. Maybe some of our younger viewers or listeners are not, but I still remember that noise that you had to listen to while your computer was connecting. And I'm pretty sure I still have a stack of 100 or 200 AOL discs sitting up in my head. but yes, the internet changed everything. I did get a little twinge when you said never. Never's a long time, so I don't know that we'll never get replaced, but I don't think it's happening anytime in the near future. And AI is just not perfected yet. It's learning at an alarming rate almost, and a fantastic rate, and it's exciting and alarming at the same time. But you can still usually tell the difference between a computer generated or an AI generated concept or speech or a message, and the difference between a real human. Look, most studies agree that the buyer is 70% of the way through the buying journey before they even speak to a salesperson these days because of the internet. But that's not a bad thing. It can be used to shorten our sales process. And the only people who I think should be afraid are the people who aren't competitive, don't have a great product or service, or don't know how to sell it, don't have the skills. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, AI is a disruptive technology, and that's, we can look at disruptive technologies through time, right? I mean, the Pony Express was a disruptive technology, right? The telegraph, the telephone, printing press, right? All of these are disruptive technologies, and that's what AI is. So should we embrace AI? Yes, because I believe it's here to stay. Will it replace human beings and, and human conversations and, connection? I don't believe so. It's just like using email in some ways. It can bridge communication in a quicker, faster manner. But I don't ever think it's ever going to replace, and I do say ever in this one, ever going to replace human to human connection and selling, especially on complex sales.
Yeah. And I think the people who are right now living in fear are making a mistake. It's just nothing to fear yet. And I think it's called the Day the Universe Changes. A fantastic special. And I haven't been able, I've searched all over the internet for it. I know I saw it years and years ago, but it's about 10 inventions that changed the entire planet. And one of them was the printing press, which changed the world because only wealthy people had books before that. The invention, I think, of gunpowder, something like that. There are some things that make quantum shifts in the world, but you don't have to be afraid. I think the thing is embrace and adapt.
Right. I mean, penicillin made a wonderful shift in the world too. Before, a lot of people were dying from, social diseases and all kinds of other, invading organisms to the human body before the antibiotic came out, right? So, I mean, this is just another generation of evolution in human, spectrum of time. I mean, it's just, that's what's going on. And as sales professionals, we need to embrace what we can use.
Yep, use it as the tool it is. Good morning, Bruce Caserman. Good to see you here. Larry Weiss, good to see you. What is Vibitno?
Vibitno is an automated prospecting and meaningful, relevant follow-up system. It's a SaaS product that we've come out with this year, and it will do AI-like things, but it really is about connecting and keeping long-term, getting a contact in play and keeping it for the long term in perpetuity. Even when we forget, because what happens, we get 100, 200, 300 contacts. It's hard to follow up with people and keep in contact with there. And the reality is that sales don't happen always on the first try. So, sometimes, I mean, I've had sales that take, 2-3 years sometimes to actually, come to fruition, but most people will never stay in touch that long. So we developed a system so they could.
That's outstanding. Yeah. In my personal business, which I think is similar to yours in some ways, I can count on less than two hands the number of one-call closes I've had in the last 19 years. It simply doesn't happen very often. Coaching services, yes, those are one-call closes typically, but sales training, that takes a while. And in my experience, by the way, like you, I've had sales that take my longest was 4.5 years to close. But you can bet I wasn't calling that person every day, but I was staying in touch. And I find that so many salespeople fail because of poor follow-up. Could you speak a little bit to why follow-up is so important and what should we be doing?
Well, it's a common courtesy, firstly, right? So, think about it. We meet with somebody, the end of the meeting, and the salesperson is not even responding at this point. Like the message being sent is, you don't care, that type of message, right? So it's a common courtesy that we follow up with one another. Follow-up is one of those things that keeps relationship really strong. And if you think about relationships in general, Jeff, when we enter a romantic relationship in the beginning, something we perceive could be romantic, we do anything. We send, like I'll speak for myself. We send them cards, we send her letters, flowers, we write poems, we write songs, we really express how we feel about this person to keep that relationship growing and strong. But we don't tend to do the same in business relationships. Now, I'm not saying you have to send them, flowers and candy and all of that. What I'm saying is we have to stay in touch, and those touch points lead to a larger growing relationship of some sort in most cases. And if you think about Facebook, what Facebook's done really great is it's reconnected people from high school, right? I mean, but I just did this the other day. A gal named Daphne and I were in the same homeroom in high school. Haven't talked to her in 40 years. I saw her there and I'm like, hi, Daphne. She's like, Doug, how are you doing? Like, it was just reconnected, right? Because Facebook, there was a connection. This is what follow-up does. If we stay in touch constantly over time, look, here's the bottom line. People's lives change and there's opportunities that open up all the time. Everyone is a potential buyer. Everyone knows a potential buyer. So in selling, if we stay following up throughout time, what we do is we picked up all those lost opportunities that go into our competitors. When we follow up through the relationship, the reality is, and you know the stats as well as I do, Jeff, 50% of salespeople never follow up once, only 13% ever follow up 4 times or more, but the average cold call sale happens on the 8th to 12th contact. And I'm quoting Chet Holmes here. Think about it. If we're doing all this work and we're going and talking to people, we're doing this and we're meeting after meeting, and we're not following up, they have competition, our competition coming in and doing the meetings. We don't follow up, the competition follows up. They get the sale. That just happened to me in my life, right? I just did this with a pest company. And you would think, well, why a pest company? I went online, 11 pest companies, 3 of them got back to me. I said, hey, this is what I'm looking for. They said, oh, we'll get our sales guy to call you. They did. One of them, day after, boom, I bought. Second one, a week later. The third one just called me yesterday, over 2 weeks later, right? So it's speed to follow up, and it's meaningful, relevant to follow up, and it's continuous to follow up. Now, the other 2 companies are smart. The ones who didn't get the business, they will stay in touch with me, because if the first one drops the ball, they've already prepped me for another company right then and there. And that's why follow-up's so important.
Yeah. And not just follow up, but also being responsive. Like you just said, when I bought my first house, it was kind of a mess. We had a lot of work to be done. And I reached out to several contractors in the neighborhood because I wanted to come in and get estimates. 1 out of 3 actually responded. Guess who got the work? The guy who showed up. I mean, he might have been the worst contractor in the world, or he might have been the best. It didn't matter at that point. He was the one who actually said, I will do the work. So you got to do that. And you're so on target with that follow-up. I just yesterday, I had the first session with a brand new coaching client. And it's 2 people, and they're in the title insurance business. Now, in title insurance, you're not really making a sale like you and I do, where you're going out and saying, here, buy my title insurance. They have to sell to centers of influence who can refer business to them, like accountants, like attorneys who do closings and things like that. And the complaint, the challenge they said was, we meet these people. We go to network events, we do this, we do that, we do the other thing, and we meet them. And they seem very interested in sending us clients, and they never, ever do. And my question was, well, how do you stay in touch with them? They said, we don't. We met them, and they don't send us any business. I said, oh, well, how about this? How about just picking up the phone every now and then and saying, how are you doing? How's everything going? Maybe give them some advice that would help them. And I mean, it's so easy to follow up with somebody and do something completely unrelated to saying, will you please buy for me? Or will you please send me some prospects so I can close some business? We all know what we're after. But when you show, I like the way you call it, a human-to-human connection. Human-to-human connection. When you call somebody, just say, how are you doing? Or is there anything I can do for you? It makes a huge difference in your life. Even if there's nothing the person can do for you. And I think I've given this example before, but I'm in a networking group for the last 18 years. The group's 35 years in existence. And there's a guy in that group who's an employment attorney. He calls me like every 6 weeks. And here's the conversation. Hey, Jeff, it's Doug Rowe. How you doing? I'm like, how you doing, Doug? And he'll say, what's going on? And I'll go, nothing. Anything I can do for you? Nope. And he'll go, okay. And I say, what can I do for you? He goes, nothing. I said, well, why'd you call? He goes, just to see how you're doing. Now, I know this guy bills out at well over $500 an hour, and every single time he does it, and it's a 3-minute call. And I'm betting he has a spreadsheet somewhere that tells him when to call me again. But every single time when I hang up, I go, God damn, that Doug Rowe's a great guy. How can I help him?
Yeah, because it's reciprocation, right? We got a gift. Because and I don't know if this happens all the time to you, Jeff, but for most people, they don't get calls like that, right? So if you don't get a call like that, when that comes out of the blue, it's like, oh my gosh, someone cares, right? Yeah. And so they care. I care about them. That's just human nature. And I'm sorry, AI, you're not going to replace that. That's just my, you can put that on my tombstone. I don't think AI will replace that. And so if you think about that concept, and anybody listening, well, let's say they just called 2 people a day, just 2. It takes 6 minutes, folks, 6. Okay. I don't care if you do this on the way to the bathroom. You could do that and say, hi, boom, and then you're done, right? Go to the bathroom and then come back. On the way back, call your other second person. The reality is you've touched, if you do that every day, 300 days a year, because it's more than 300 days a year, and people argue, I don't work every day. Okay. That's 600 people that we've touched on a, annual basis. So if you had 100 people, you were touching 50 of them a month, let's say on average or whatever. I mean, those relationships, when you call for a favor or they run into something. In fact, Jeff, I just had this happen. I went out to California. I had a client that I haven't done work for, but we've been in touch every single, quarter, just like that. I just send an email. How you doing? I didn't know he sold his company, right? He called it stupid money. So I know it was like tens of millions of dollars, right? And so I say, hey, I'm going to be out in your area. And he's like, come by for lunch. Let's get together for lunch. We get together for lunch. I sit down at the table. He goes, I want you to meet my new business partner in another venture. I said, great. What are you guys doing? He tells me. I said, great. I said, what do you want from me? He goes, I want you to tell us whether or not we're on the right track. And I'd like to hire you and your teams to come in here if we are on the right track. You know what I mean? Like, okay, 0 acquisition costs, folks. That's pretty high profit, right? So the reality is it's just from keeping the relationship together. And if I had a problem, I know I can call this gentleman and I could say, listen, can I give it, talk, right? And so this is what the quality of life really is. Tony Robbins, I sorry to keep quoting Tony, but he has these quotes. He says, the quality of your life is quality of your relationships. And it's really true, not only in personal life, but in business life as well. Because when we have challenges or we need something, those people are usually there at least to give us some advice or some, guidance along the path. And we all need that in business because we can't see every blind spot in our life or our business. Yeah. So follow-up is a really important thing, and it transcends a lot more than just getting business.
Yeah, absolutely. But by the way, the guy who you met with, he might have been just about ready to call you anyways, but you don't know. And you reaching out like that made it happen. By the way, you never have to apologize to me about quoting Tony Robbins. I love that guy. I've been following him and I'm a fan for years and years and years. Absolutely. And the other thing is that it doesn't have to be even a 3-minute phone call. Send somebody a text, an email. Here's what the thing that I love to do. I love to go on the internet, Google something that I know will help them. If they're a sales manager, how to be a better sales manager. If I know they love golf, what's the newest technique for shortening your putter? But I'm not a golfer, so I don't know what would be good. But stuff like that, and you send it over to them. A little thing like that, they're like deposits in the bank, because you're, like you said, your competition is going after your customer every single day, trying to take them away from you or your prospects. And if you don't stay in touch, they think you don't care. I love that. Doug, you wrote an article a while back called 29 Sales Tips to Increase Your Close Rate. And I'd like to discuss lots of them, but I mean, everything you wrote in there was terrific. What about maintain momentum?
Well, I learned this from Donald Trump, actually. So Donald had written in a book one time that, there was a gentleman that was in real estate, got out of real estate, came back in, but he was in real estate at that time, was as successful as Donald was when he left. When he came back in, he had a very hard time getting back into real estate again. And Donald wrote it was because he lost momentum. So in selling, Jeff, you know this as well as anybody. Selling happens on a wave, right? It's a periodic wave. We have a contact, and then there's usually a time that will close. And the more that we keep in that funnel of flow, the more that contact time will reveal itself. And so we're gaining momentum through that whole process. If we stop the process, like you take, a month off from prospecting, for example, okay? So let's say that we're in May today, and let's say that, your sales cycle is 3 months. If you take a month off today, 3 months to the 4th month, you're going to see a lull in your income. That's going to happen. So that's one of the reasons momentum is so important, is to keep cash flow coming in. Also, momentum is important for us to keep, for doing things like keeping our brain fresh, on certain things. So momentum is the thing that carries us through the tough times, and it carries us through the happy times. We don't realize it's carrying us through the happy times because they're just happy. It's like one of those things where you're like, oh my God, 9 sales came in this week. It's like, whoa, that's awesome, right? That's due to momentum. It's a law in physics. I didn't make this up. It's just, what happens. So that's why momentum is so important, because it just continuously keeps that wave pushed. And, we need to do that. I mean, try not working out, folks, for a month and see what happens to your body, especially if you're over 40, right? So that's why momentum is it keeps us sharp, and it keeps us going. And it keeps us at our peak performance.
Yeah, it's easier to stay going or keep going than it is to get going. And I can't tell you how many times I've given the same advice you just gave. The thing that you said, those 9 sales came in this week, that's great. Except what people typically do is they go, oh, I'm too busy to do anything else. I got to process these sales. And what's the first thing to go? Prospecting. And you're going to get hit somewhere down the line. Like when I sell sales training services, I sell 4 different services. But when I sell sales training, I have an 8-week sales cycle. So from the time I say hello till the time they decide to choose to do business with me, it's 8 weeks. Well, anytime I stop prospecting. Somewhere down the line, there's going to be a period, whether it's a week or 8 weeks or more, where I can't possibly bring in any income because I wasn't continually filling the pipeline. I think
Right.
that's one of the most important things that salespeople fail to focus on and need to. Consistent and effective prospecting, I say, solves 50% of all sales problems.
The master prospector will always outsell the master closer, Jeff, and that for that reason. Always.
100%. 100%. Good morning, Ray Aurora. We're a little bit more than halfway through. We're speaking to Doug C. Brown. He's the CEO of CEO Sales Strategies and the author of Win-Win Selling. If you have any questions for Doug, please put them in the comments and I'll pass them on before we go. Doug, one of the suggestions you made was to increase your close rate is to create urgency by shortening your trial period. This is you can certainly talk about trial periods, but this is something we sales, gurus say all the time. You got to create urgency, and it's a struggle because really the prospectors are on their timeline. They don't care about our sales cycle; they care about their buying cycle. So, what can we do to create urgency?
Well, I mean, urgency is not pressure selling. Urgency has to be created for a value-based ROI on their end. So that's where I think people drop the ball, Jeff, is because what they do is they go, oh, it's end of month, man, I got to bring in sales, so let's pressure these people, right? So if we take an offer and we figure out what the professional and personal ROI is to that person, and then we can craft something that creates a sense of urgency, shortening up the offer, for example, in some capacities, then what ends up happening is we serve them and we serve us at the same time. So what we as the seller have to look and say, okay, what's the value proposition for them, right? I have found that people by nature, we as the seller, let me back up. We as the seller, we have to build trust. If we build trust with the seller, we're in a good position. But we want to build that trust level up so that the buyer trusts us more than they trust their own decisions. That's where you can shorten up the sales cycle. So you can do that through an offer, understanding the ROI. A lot of people will hold because it depends on whether we're selling B2C or B2B. But if we're dealing B2B, which I do mostly, B2B, they're banking, like when somebody buys B2C, they're banking on some money. Let's say they want to go buy a boat, right? Or I just bought a motorcycle. I'll use that. Bought a motorcycle, and I bought the bike. I didn't even ride the bike. I just thought it was great. I bought the bike, got on the bike, riding around like, oh, this bike's not for me, right? I spent a few $1,000s. I'm like, I know what bike I need. I took that bike, traded it in, lost a little bit of money on the bike, but I got the bike I wanted, right? So when we're making a personal consumer decision, we're talking about maybe some money we might lose. When we're a business to business decision, we might be banking on our whole career in that decision. So when we're banking on our career or our business, we have 40 employees and we make this decision, it goes bad, they're out of business. We are just naturally going to hold on that decision longer. This is where we need to build trust to get to a place where they trust us more than they trust their own decisions. And that's where we can get in and shorten up the sales cycle, because we can then do value-based propositions to get them to move. And by the way, this is not manipulation. This is win-win. So if we do that, that will shorten it up. So what I have found is the shorter the offer creates a little sense of urgency in their mind, because we all don't like to lose. But as long as it's not pressure-based, that's where it really gets into being a detriment.
Yeah. One thing I always giggle at, but actually don't like, is when I'm talking to a salesperson. They go, well, if you buy in the next 10 minutes, I can give you this discount, or we're at the end of the month or we're at the end of the quarter, and I can definitely convince my boss. To me, that's a message saying, oh, you can discount now. Well, guess what? You'll discount next month too. And
that's right.
I was dealing with I hate to throw out a name, but I was dealing with ZoomInfo for a client of mine, and we were evaluating ZoomInfo, which is a great product as far as I'm concerned. And the guy, he was dealing with one of my salespeople, and then it got to the point where I needed to get in there and make the decision. So I said, okay, let's let him give me a demo. And I was very, very impressed. And, the price is X, but if you do it today, I can do this. I'm like, what do you mean today? He goes, well, it's, we're 3 days from the end of the month. So actually anytime in the next 3 days, I'll go pound my boss for you. I said, oh, well, we're not going to make a decision in the next 3 days. It's just not going to happen because I now have to take this to our executive board, sell them on it, blah, blah, blah. Definitely not going to be in the next 3 days. He goes, well, if it's the next 3 days, I can do X. I said, let me tell you this. I guarantee you that if I call you in 2 weeks or a month or 3 months from now, you're not only going to give me this deal, you're going to give me a better deal. No, Jeff, it doesn't work that way. I think you know the end of the story, Doug. He called me every week for months, and eventually I got an even better deal that he told me I couldn't get anyways. I don't like to play games with prospects. I'm with you. Sell them on the value. And to me, the key is having enough in your pipeline at all times so that you don't worry about closing one deal.
That's right.
You're consistently closing business because you're constantly prospecting, constantly putting people at the top of that funnel and moving them through. I mean, it's not rocket science.
No, it's very easy. It really is. It comes down to third grade math when it really comes down to it, if you break it down on paper. So I agree. You could have called him 30 days from that point. You would have got the similar offer and the similar spiel. I always like to mess with those people, Jeff, when they say that. They go, in the next 3 days, I go, what if I make it in the next 30 minutes?
The one that I is, when you're buying a car, I will always go the last 3 days of the month because they are desperate to close business. So from the buying side, you can negotiate more effectively. What about this one? Talk to the right prospects. I think I know where you're going with this, but could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, so we have leads, marketing leads, we have sales qualified leads, sales ready leads, and purchase order ready leads. Right? Those are really the types of leads that are being generated. And salespeople who don't like marketing, send me the hate mail. You're out of your mind. They can help you, right? I mean, marketing is great because marketing is part of selling, really, when it comes down to it. So the challenge for salespeople with marketing is marketing produces what's called leads or marketing qualified leads. And that means that the salesperson now has to work harder in order to close that lead. It doesn't mean it's not a good lead. It just means that they've got to go through more of a discovery process and establish, need and value-based and all of that, right? What salespeople love are sales-ready leads or purchase order leads. That's what they want. It's like the prospect shows up and they go, oh, geez, Jeff, here's 3 credit cards, run them all to the max. I really appreciate being here today, right? That's what they want, most salespeople.
Me too.
Yeah, me as well. It's a great feeling, right? And so what we want is to talk to the right quality person. So we want to talk to the buyer. So through our nurturing process of getting, or discovery process of getting there, a lot of people are talking to the wrong prospect. They're the wrong person, right? They're not talking to the buyer. They're talking to somebody who can't make a decision. And so the way we do that is we got to get these leads from lead to marketing qualified to sales qualified to sales ready. Sales ready is what parameters as a salesperson do we need in order to talk to these people? Now, as a salesperson, we have a job to do. We need to nurture and culture that relationship to get them to sales ready leads. So we have to know who is the right prospect for us, who is the right buyer, what do they fear, what do they want, what do they value. All of these parameters we should know about our ideal buying client, and that's who we should be talking to on a regular basis. It doesn't mean we won't mess up a little and go, oh, geez, we talked to a few influencers or whatever. That's fine too. That happens. But that's the ideal. So if we focus on that ideal, then we know what to filter out. The challenge for most salespeople is they don't disqualify. They're trying to always qualify. And so if you go back to your statement, Jeff, if you always have more in the funnel that you need, then we are much more comfortable as salespeople going, oh, okay, this one doesn't fit the criteria. So I'll segment them. Now, don't throw them away, folks, because it takes time. Sometimes you can segment them over to a different system of communication. Like you you segment them, and then you send them something once a month or whatever, and keep in constant, communication. But the reality is we should only be talking to those sales ready or purchase order ready leads that are through. But most of them will be sales ready leads, but we have to define what they are. And that's what I mean by that.
Yeah. And the other thing about it, you mentioned it just now. The other thing I find quite often is that once you've got a prospect in the pipeline, I find many, if not most salespeople are just awful at figuring out how much time and effort should I put into this particular prospect. Are they really a good prospect? Because my experience is that salespeople tend to treat all prospects equally, but they're
Yes.
not. They're not,
Correct.
based on maybe the dollar volume of the sale, how ready they are to buy, who's involved in the decision-making process. I don't chase first of all, I don't chase anybody, but I don't chase every prospect equally. I'm looking for the ones that are most likely to close and most likely to close the soonest. That's who's getting the bulk of my attention. Not that I'm not giving any attention to others, but you only have so much time in the day, week, and month to do what we do, which is sell, and you got to use it wisely. And the other thing I despise is salespeople who are constantly calling every prospect to follow up with them and leaving a message like, "Hey, it's Jeff Goldberg, just following up with you. Give me a call. Hey, calling up to follow up on that proposal again." I mean, that to me is about the stupidest message you can leave somebody, because what you're really saying is, "Hey, Doug, did you decide to buy from me but forget to let me know?" It
Right.
just doesn't happen. Let's see. We've got a question for you. Let's see if I can bring that up. There we go. You just mentioned about not disqualifying. My thoughts were that if you only disqualify if they don't have dollars or they tell me to take them off my list. Are you telling us more?
So, if they don't have money, what's the reason for it, right? That would be my first question. So, look, again, I deal a lot more with B2B than B2C. I'm not sure if that's B2B or B2C, but the reality is most companies don't have budgets for what you're selling. In most cases, it's not like you come out of the blue and they go, "Oh my gosh, we appropriated that last Tuesday, all this money for this," right? So there's always situations where there's no budget. Budget can be created. There's always money. The question is, what is it priority? So if it's B2C, so thank you. So Jeff, can you put the question back up there for me?
Sure.
So if they don't have money and it's B2C, my question is it they don't have the money or they don't have the money for the offer? Because if you're dealing in a place where they don't have money consistently, then you're probably farming and you're probably hunting in the wrong area. Now, if it's just that they say, "I don't have the money," a lot of times that's just, as it's said in the old days, a smokescreen objection, right? That is just something that they're saying. And the reality is, I would get to what I would call the real it. What is the real fear? What are they really saying? Because all objections are rooted in fear. And so if it's rooted in fear, we've got to now find out what the real reason is, because it may not be the real money. It might be like, "Hey, if I make this wrong decision, it's going to impact me with my spouse." And that's what I'm most concerned about in a B2C type environment. Remember, they're going to lose money, but money's always connected with some type of emotion. So you don't always disqualify on money. You can. I would recommend you don't. I would recommend that if that they don't have that money for that particular product or service, what could you sell them that they do have the money for at that point? Because if you don't sell them something at that moment, they're moving on to somewhere else. So if you have a downsell of some sort and you can capture the relationship, you can build upon that relationship.
Great stuff. Here's another one that I use personally to disqualify people. If I've met with you, will you give me another meeting? If you won't give me a next meeting, a next step, you're not qualified as far as I'm concerned, at least not right now. I'll put you in a separate pile and maybe we'll bring you back to life later. But I'm certainly not chasing after anybody who, when I say, "Hey, Doug, this has been a great meeting. I think what the thing we should do next is let me go back to my office, think about everything we talked about. I'm going to put some ideas on paper. Then I'd like to come back and share those ideas with you. That way, you'll have all the information you need to make an intelligent decision whenever you're ready. How does that sound to you?" And if you say something like, "Yeah, just call me when it's ready," or "Call me next month, call me next quarter," that really pretty much means call me when hell freezes over. But salespeople who don't have enough in their pipeline go, "Oh, okay." Now you go back, you do a bunch of work, you try to reach out to somebody. They don't return your calls. They don't return your emails. If they were interested in what you had to offer, and not everybody is, it's just the way life works. then they would have said, they would have met with you again. And that's a great way to judge whether somebody's actually interested. Like the type of people I'm assuming you meet are the type of people I sell to: vice presidents of sales and EVPs and SVPs, presidents and CEOs. Well, if somebody like that gives me some of their valuable time and then agrees to give me more of their valuable time, I know I've got somebody who's interested. And if they won't, they're disqualifying themselves as far as I'm concerned. And because I'm consistently prospecting, I don't need them. Give me a call anytime you're ready. I'm happy to talk to you. So long. And I leave skid marks in their driveway getting out the door, looking to speak to the next person who is interested. I want to get to another one, though, because this one stuck out for me because, again, it's exactly the way I feel. In fact, my sales training program is called Conversational Selling Skills. And you say, make the sales process conversational. Bravo. Could you please expand on that one?
Well, I mean, it's a natural extension of how we communicate as human beings. I mean, if you think about two little kids when they're talking, what are they doing? They're having a conversation. Now, as adults, we may not even understand what they're talking about, but they're having a conversation, right? And so the reality is that's how we did this from the beginning, right? So when you meet a friend, you talk to them and you have a conversation. You're having some type of meaningful dialogue to find out if there's some common ground to build a relationship off of. But for some reason, when people start selling, they start trying to overly persuade, or they're trying to play win-lose. I got to make a sale, this, that. And what they're forgetting about is they're dealing with a human being on the other side who just wants a conversation to understand. If I have a problem, for example, and I'm the potential buyer, I want somebody to help me resolve the problem. If I have an opportunity that I'm looking to go after and I don't know how to get it, I want somebody to help me get that opportunity. Yes, but I don't want somebody coming in selling me. I want somebody that I can go, yeah, I'd like to buy that. And how do we do that? We do that through conversation.
Yes, exactly right. And that's my argument with the way most companies do demos. It's just somebody monologuing for 15, 20, 30 minutes, showing PowerPoint slide after PowerPoint slide. There's no conversation whatsoever. You have no idea what the prospect's thinking. It's just you giving a speech. Now, I know that, like me, you're a professional speech maker, and there is a point where we get on a stage and it's time to give a speech. But when you're interacting with a prospect, how about doing exactly that? Let's interact. To me, the definition of selling is sales is a conversation or a series of conversations leading to help the other person choose to do business with you. So if you want to get better at sales, be a better conversationalist, not a monologist. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and if you're a monologist, basically what you're doing is you're getting marketing qualified leads at that point.
Yeah. Speaking of leads, almost every salesperson, myself included, wants better and more leads. What about marketing automation? Any suggestions for creating like an engaging automated marketing campaign?
Yeah, I would write, I use a lot of cold email. And so, I'm a big proponent on using email. Now with, with AI coming out, I think it's going to get a little flooded, right? But look, here's the thing. The more automation you can have going out that's meaningful and relevant to someone, that is not salesy, the more leads you'll pick up. So the more messaging that we have come out, no matter what medium we're getting on, and we can automate that gives us leverage. So I have a campaign going on right now where I'm going after, my top 200, potential buyers. And I'm getting responses back on the email going, is this automated or is this live? Which is a really good response, right? Or they'll come back and they'll say, my God, this made me laugh. So thank you, right? Or this is so meaningful and relevant to what's going on in my industry right now. But it's all automated, right? This just goes out automated. So we can use automated technology. What we don't want to do is we don't want to do in the old days what they used to do is spam, right? And that's just sending messages that have no relevancy, no meaning whatsoever to people. So how do we do this? We look up things about people and we make it personalized. So if you see they went to Harvard University, I will put in this message, hey, I saw you went to Harvard University and graduated with an MBA. There must have been a rigorous course of study. Congratulations. And so they know it's a human being looking at that. The challenge, Jeff, when people use automation is they're not putting anything like this whatsoever into their automation. They're sending out going, hi, I'm great. My company's great. I'm sure you need this, you know, and I just got a couple the other day. It's like one saying, you know, hey, your manufacturing facility can use XYZ. And I'm like, I don't own a manufacturing facility. It's like,
I get them all the time, Doug. It's crazy. Or dear Mrs. Goldberg, really? Okay.
yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, not to belabor the point, but email marketing should be part of everybody's marketing mix. You should be doing a mix of a lot of different things, but
Mhm.
I used to send out a monthly newsletter, stopped it years ago for whatever reason, doesn't matter at this point, but just recently I engaged with a company to market this podcast and vlogcast. And just yesterday, the first email went out saying, here's what we did last week, here's what's coming up tomorrow, which was your picture and my picture and, promoting this. And it in no way was promoting my services, except I got an email response yesterday afternoon saying, hey, by any chance, do you help companies streamline their sales process? Yes, as a matter of fact, I do.
Hello.
Just as I sent out an email to somebody, not personalized at all, but it was a contact from me that I caught somebody at the right time. It's one more way of staying in touch. And, you said it before, it takes multiple touches to close a sale. It certainly takes multiple touches just to get somebody to respond and say, hey, will you speak with me? Email marketing should be part of everybody's mix. We're running out of time, and there's 8 zillion more things I want to ask you. But one of them is, because I found this fascinating, at one point you were selling musical instruments, and you sold to some pretty big names. Would you like to talk about that a little bit? Because I was impressed.
That was one of the funnest things I've ever done in my life. So yeah, I actually used to sell music equipment to the bands, Aerosmith, Billy Joel's band, Jake Giles, the Eagles, members of the Eagles, Extreme, Boston. I had a great time. That was like the best job I ever had in my life. We'd wake up late morning, go to work, hang out with professional musicians, talk the business, then go out to clubs at night and play and be around that. And it was a great gig. Anything specifically you like to know?
I was just impressed with the names when I saw them on the website. I mean, what are you going to do today? I'm going to go hang out with Joe Walsh and sell him a guitar. I mean, that sounds pretty impressive to me.
Well, because Joe liked a certain type of pick for his guitar, and he couldn't find them very often, so we happened to carry them. So with Joe Walsh, the way that happened is we got a call. He was on tour, and he ran out of those picks, and that's how it started. To go serve. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing: the music business is a business, and it's a sales business like any business. But it's all about developing relationships. Don't think for a moment that some of these famous musicians didn't know other famous musicians. And to illustrate it, "Take It Easy," I think was written by Jackson Browne, and the Eagles and Jackson Browne used to hang out together in California. So, that's how it works.
And Linda Ronstadt put them together in the
it's the Stone Ponies and all that. So there was.
And before we go, what kind of motorcycle did you get?
I actually bought a Honda. I bought a Honda Shadow.
Great bike.
I loved it. It was like coming home.
That was my first bike. I bought a Honda Shadow Spirit. It's very funny. When I took it in for the first service to the place that I bought it, the salesperson walked out. He goes, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." I'm like, "Why are you glad to see me?" He goes, "Because as you drove away, we were taking bets that you weren't going to make it home. You did not look like you knew what you were doing." By the way, I crashed that one, got into a terrible accident, fractured my collarbone, broke 2 ribs, and then bought what was it? It was another Honda, though. They're great bikes. That Shadow was such a cool bike that Harleys used to pull up to me and go, "That's a nice bike," which Harleys don't usually look at Hondas and say nice bike.
No, Harleys don't look at anything but Harleys and say that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Doug, thank you so much for all this great information and for generously sharing your wisdom with us. I don't have anything that I can share on my screen, but would you like to tell people how they can reach you if they're interested in speaking with you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me directly by email, Doug@ceosalesstrategies.com, or you can send it into YouMatter, YOUMATTER @ceosalesstrategies.com. My LinkedIn's Doug Brown 123. It's pretty easy to remember. And Jeff, do you mind if I give your guest a I'm finishing up an ebook on a nonstop 1% earner, and go through the psychology and philosophy of that. And I'm going to sell it, but I didn't ask you this, so I'm asking you now, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot.
If you want to give them a gift, sure, that'd be lovely.
No, as a courtesy for you, them listening to your show, if they want the ebook, just say, hey, Jeff Goldberg ebook, give it to me, and I'll make sure that it gets out to you. Just send it to the email, because it's not even out yet.
Great. And if you have not already joined the Sales Pro Network on Facebook, if you'd like to go in and just put that link below this interview, you're certainly welcome to do that. It's very kind of you. And there was something else I was going to say, but now I've completely forgotten. At any rate, I really do appreciate your time today, and thank you so much. And I'll end as I always do. Gang, please remember that sales is a game of making things happen. So get out there and make sales happen. Have a great one. Thanks, Doug. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeff.
So